Welcome to the Dive in 5 for 4th grade for add and subtract fractions and mixed numbers with like denominators. And I'm Bailey.
I'm Shanna. Welcome.
So what I want you to do right now is you're going to pause the video and you're going to complete these 4 tasks either with your team or with a partner or even on your own. While you're doing these tasks, I want you to think about what student learning would need to look like for students to be successful with each task. And once you've done that, consider what progression would you order the task in.
So meaning like what order would I introduce these tasks in or teach them in?
Absolutely. So when we think about the progression with BEST in terms of adding and subtracting fractions, we first think about 3rd grade. And in 3rd grade, they were focusing on adding and subtracting multi-digit whole numbers. They also modeled and interpreted unit fractions using visual models. And then they started to decompose those fractions into the sum of a unit fraction. As we move into 4th grade, they continued their work with decomposing fractions, and now they're doing it as a sum in multiple different ways. They then move forward to add and subtract fractions with like denominators using that procedural reliability, and they're also expected to solve real-world problems involving addition and subtraction of the like denominators. As they move into 5th grade, they'll begin to work with fractions with unlike denominators, and they're still expected to have that procedural reliability.
So procedural reliability, I keep hearing that phrase over and over. What exactly does that mean, and what does that look like?
So procedural reliability is where students are able to go through the exploration phase and they get to select the strategy and the method that works the best for their understanding. It's important to understand that teachers are going to need to support students with selecting the best method for their learning style.
So that doesn't mean like the strategies and models are gone. We're just trying to get them to the most efficient way for them to continuously be able to solve problems.
Absolutely.
And then it looks like we're focusing on adding, subtracting fractions and including those real world problems in this video.
Yes. So they'll build on the understanding of the decomposing fractions. So as we begin this work with adding and subtracting fractions with like denominators, students are going to build on their understanding of decomposing fractions in a variety of ways, which also includes those fractions and mixed numbers greater than 1. Throughout this unit, students should focus on strategies with concrete tools and visual representation, which could include pattern blocks, fraction tiles, could also include number lines and drawings.
Ooh, I love using pattern blocks to add and subtract fractions. It's a great way to show how we're regrouping and renaming into those mixed numbers because sometimes we don't have enough fraction tiles to do that. So definitely use those pattern blocks.
Absolutely. And students are also going to be exposed to a lot of real-world problems involving addition and subtraction throughout the learning progression.
So they're going to apply those strategies that they learn with the concrete and representational and then move it into solving real world problems.
Absolutely. When students start adding and subtracting fractions with like denominators, we need to focus on those concrete tools. So this could include the fraction tiles, fraction circles, or even the pattern blocks. When students are first starting in the learning progression, they should be exposed to problems that are involving addition and subtraction of fractions that are either less than or equal to 1.
I feel like that's so important because I just need you to understand the concept of adding fractions, that the denominators don't change because the size of the pieces didn't change. It's the number of pieces. And in order to understand that, we need to stay less than a whole and for them to see those patterns.
Right. So if we look at task number 4, which you were asked to do at the beginning, you have 5/8 plus 2/8. And if we drew a model, we would still be at 7/8, which is less than 1 whole. The other problem is task number 1, which was a word problem, and it is 12 pieces, and there's 9/12 eaten, and so we're still within that 1 whole, so students can really understand what it means to subtract with like denominators. So once students are able to model using the concrete tools, they should then start to draw representations of their models. So these representations could include a picture or could even include a number line.
I think that's so important to move from the concrete to the representational and make those connections so that we can progress to that procedural reliability.
Absolutely. It's so important to make those connections between all the representations and all the different types of models. Once students begin to master adding and subtracting fractions with sums and differences less than or equal to 1, they then should move to modeling problems with mixed numbers that require regrouping. So in the model below with the fraction tiles, we have some fractions that we're adding together. So we have 1 and 3/4 plus 1 and 2/4. And when we add them together, we combine them. But Shanna, why is the last one look different than the second one?
Well, it looks like you took those 5/4 that you had combined in that second picture and you made one whole. So I have one whole and 1/4 remaining. So you can almost see that I now have regrouped it to another whole. So now my answer is 3 1/4.
Right, so we can definitely use the concrete tools to show regrouping, and we can even do that with subtraction and the pattern blocks.
Love the pattern blocks.
So this is similar to task number 3, where students were asked to find the difference of these two mixed numbers that required regrouping.
And I think it's really important for students to show the understanding with the models and use the language of math when they're describing the steps and not just get stuck in a procedure.
So as students are working with the concrete model, they then want to start drawing representations, either using pictures or number lines. So in the two pictures above, you can see that there's a number line and there's also a model of the same type of problem. Students should also be asked to decompose and rename fractions in a variety of ways to support their regrouping with adding and subtracting.
And also just recognizing that I see 3 1/4 and I'm subtracting 1 3/4. There's a need for that regrouping because I don't have enough force to subtract from. So I got to do something else.
Absolutely.
So now I see 3 1/4 has been modified in equivalent value into 2 4/4 and 1/4. So now I can actually subtract that 3/4 from that 4/4.
So we want to ask you to pause the video and take a look at this problem that a student did. While you're considering this problem, I want you to think about the question: how could manipulatives and models help the student understand this concept? So Shanna, what do you notice about the student work?
Well, what I originally noticed is, number one, they recognized that they needed to regroup. Like, I can't take 7/8 from 3/8. But what I'm seeing is they're connecting it to what they did with addition and subtraction with whole numbers, and they regrouped. They treated it as regrouping a 10 for 10 ones. So changing that 4 to a 3 and the 3 to a 13. Like, sometimes they get caught in those steps of regrouping and don't really understand them, because really we're trying to regroup a whole, not a 10.
Absolutely. And so if students are using models, they're able to draw what this looks like, and they're able to fix their mistakes and their misconceptions they have with regrouping.
Yeah, I can see where they change 4 3/8 for that 3 11/8, so I can visualize it and understand it.
So throughout this unit, we've talked a lot about the different concrete tools. That's the pattern blocks, the fraction tiles, fraction circles. And then we move into this representation, which is the drawing of number lines or drawing of pictures. And finally, kind of into that abstract island where we're thinking about it in terms of equations and we're regrouping. It's so critical, though, that we don't treat this as a linear, and that we're going back and forth in between the models, the representation, and the abstract thinking.
I feel like until a student has a really solid foundation and understands describing using that math language, they should always be required to use some kind of model to back up their equations.
Right. It shows their thinking, and it definitely helps with some of those misconceptions that they have with regrouping.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks so much for joining us for our 4th grade Dive in 5 of add and subtract fractions and mixed numbers. We hope you join us for our next one.
See you soon.